I was asked by somebody I know through Facebook as a retired police officer, to give an opinion on US policing. So this is all this is, me giving my voice in order to see if it is helpful to something. Okay, so I have no other agenda other than that. It is just I've changed to a follow on Instagram, and I'm looking at a lot of people of colour on Instagram, and they have said that we need to use our voice. So this is me using mine, okay, in order to try and help something. Okay, if it helps, it helps. If it doesn't, then all I have wasted is my time, and all you have wasted is your time, and however long it takes to watch this video. Okay, so I have been a police officer in some capacity, or was a police officer in some capacity, from 1992 until 2015. I was a volunteer part-time police officer from 1992 to 1997 while I was studying for my degree, and then I joined Strathclyde Police in 1997 and left in 2015. So I had 18 years as a full-time police officer, and then 5 years experience prior to that as a part-time police officer. In my 18 years as a full-time police officer, I did around 9 years in uniform in a busy subdivision in Glasgow. I then did various roles in plainclothes for the other 9 years. So I did a year in a plainclothes warrants team, where we located and arrested people who had not appeared for court and not paid fines. Then 2 years or so in a local crime team, so that would be like a local drug squad or plainclothes crime team, and then I did 6 years as a surveillance officer for the organised crime and counter-terrorist unit. Okay, so it was 6 years of full-time surveillance, and that's what we did for 6 years. So that was working on the more serious high-end stuff, bigger drug dealers, murders, serious sex offenders, and counter-terrorist jobs. I also had a brief stint doing some undercover work as a foundation undercover officer, where I would pose as a drug addict and buy heroin, crack and cocaine. Okay, so that's the background that I have done. I was as a uniform officer, I attended thousands of incidents, and I have had tens of thousands of interactions with the public. I have been assaulted. During one of my plainclothes jobs, I was hijacked, or somebody tried to steal my car at gunpoint. And the police in Scotland are unarmed. The police in the UK are generally unarmed. Okay, so that is that's my background. Okay, now what happens with interpersonal violence? Most people, thankfully, in modern societies, most people don't have a lot of experience, or even any experience, dealing with interpersonal violence. Okay, so when the police go to arrest somebody, there are two things that they are trying to achieve. They're trying to arrest that person, okay, and they're trying not to get injured. Okay, so those are the two things. So if you're assaulted in the street, okay, if you're a victim of violent crime in the street, you only have the objective of not getting injured. So you can run away, okay, or you can defend yourself to such stages that you is the minimal use of force, okay. And the police in the UK are allowed to use reasonable force in order to effect an arrest. So one of the things a lot of the time when we're arresting people who are being violent is that we're trying not to hurt them. Okay, now the three worst instances I had of resisting arrest were from 3 women, and it was because of those reasons. 2 of them were young women in their late teens, and one of them was I was on my own. At the time I weighed about 78 kilos or something like that, 80 kilos, which is around about 175 pounds or 12 stone. And this woman was half my size, and it was one of the most difficult arrests I made, because I was on my own and I was trying not to hurt her. Okay, so all I was trying to do was put her in handcuffs, but she struggled so violently, and I was trying not to hurt her, that it was then it was a problem for me, okay, because I was twice her size, and I was actually trying to be delicate, okay, or as delicate as I could. So it's not like you see in the movies, and it's not even like you see in the UFC. Though the guys in the UFC are trained fighters fighting each other, and in the movies it's choreographed. Okay, real fights and real arrests are really messy. They're really quick, and if you're looking at them from an outside point of view, they look significantly more violent than they are. Okay. Because generally what I would try and do is I would take a hold of the person, and as soon as they started struggling violently, what I would try and do is kick their legs away from them and put them on the ground and get on top of them, because that's a safer position for everybody. It's safe for me because they're less likely to be able to punch and kick me. I'm also trying to affect the rest, so they can't escape quite so easily if they're on the ground and I'm on top of them. And it means I then don't have to punch and kick them in order to affect that arrest. Okay, so you'll see very often on videos online where it's like 4 cops and it's a big pile-on. Okay, that's actually not a bad arrest. Okay, it becomes a bad arrest when they then don't let the person back up. All right. Right, now positional asphyxia is where somebody is on the ground, and through the position that they are in, they can't breathe. Okay, and we've seen examples of that often on social media and on news reports. Right, so when the person is then arrested, the cops should now not be sitting on that person, okay, because by sitting on them, they're not allowing the person's diaphragm to move, and the person can't breathe and can just suffocate, okay. And with George Floyd a couple of weeks ago, with the police officer's pressure on his neck, it probably wasn't a suffocation, it was a strangulation, more than likely, okay, but I don't know, but that looks likely what has happened, okay. Alright, now I've made some notes here so I don't forget anything. Now in Commonwealth countries, in fact, I'm going to preface that by saying white Commonwealth countries, okay, so Canada, New Zealand, Australia and the UK, we police by consent, okay, so policing by consent indicates that the legitimacy of policing in the eyes of the public is based upon a general consensus of support that follows from transparency about their powers, their integrity in exercising those powers, and their accountability for doing so. Okay, so the police in the UK police with the consent of the public, and when that consent changes, the policing tactics change. An example of that was maybe 15 years ago or so, the police in Scotland started abusing stop search powers. Okay, so we've been using them well in order to combat violent crime, because we have a lot of violent knife crime, or did have a lot of violent knife crime, and this was when I was a patrol officer, we used stop search powers very well and very effectively, and along with a multi-agency approach, we reduced the amount of violent crime. What then happened is then it became a stats exercise, okay, and it became your reviews were related, your performance reviews were related to the number of stop searches you were doing, and that became a problem, okay. Became a problem for the public, so the public complained, they complained to their representatives, and the tactic changed, okay. So there's very rarely stop searches now, okay, and I mean very rarely. So my son is 18, I live in an urban area. 15 years ago, as an 18-year-old, he could have fully expected to be stopped and searched at some point over the weekend, okay, and now it just does not happen at all, okay. So that's an example of policing by consent in those countries that I mentioned, and the US does not have that, okay. Now, I have to, in order to give an opinion on US policing, I thought about it, it's not quite as easy as that. What's my opinion about that? There has to be a greater context of that. So in the UK we have free healthcare, and up until fairly recently we had free higher education, which we still do in Scotland, okay. So a graduate going into the police or any other police officer going into the police, they don't have to worry about health insurance, okay, because we pay our taxes for that, and we don't also have to worry about paying back a massive student debt, which the US police officers have to, okay. So I think that the pressure on US citizens is significantly greater, and that's across the board, than it is in the UK for those two reasons. So there can be more fear within the population as a result of that. Fear of getting sued, fear of losing your job, and for police officers, fear of getting injured and not being able to pay their medical expenses. So they do get some insurance through their department, but it's not always comprehensive. There is a limit to what they get. Okay, so that's to give some context. Okay, now a few years ago, after the so that was 2015, I think. Now, apologise if I'm getting some of the dates and some of the details of the incidents wrong. Okay, so after the Ferguson shooting of Michael Brown, that was one of a run of higher profile shootings of unarmed black men and youths, which was then publicised on the news. So after the Ferguson shooting, about 20 police chiefs and senior police officers from departments in the US came to Scotland, and they went to the Scottish Police College to study how do UK police officers deal with violent, armed, and I mean edged weapons, not firearms, violent armed people without the use of firearms. Okay, because that's most police officers' broad experiences here, and they've only recently, in the last few years, started training some or more police officers in the use of tasers here. Okay, so police officers up until fairly recently, and as a standard across the board in the UK, will have a pepper spray or CS spray, so something of that, an incapacitant spray, a baton, and handcuffs, and that is their personal protective equipment and body armour. Okay, and the body armour is rated for edged weapons as well. Okay, so these cops came across and studied how do UK cops deal with that. Okay, and one of the things that they found was that I'm still referring to myself as if I'm a cop, is that the Scottish police engaged with the public all the time. Okay, so the New York Times had sent a reporter here as well to cover them, and I read the article, and I knew the sergeant who he had gone out with over a busy weekend in Glasgow. Okay, so Glasgow's a big party city at the weekend. Thousands and thousands of people hitting hundreds of clubs and pubs. And how do we deal with that? Okay, so the reporter from the New York Times observed that the cops were constantly engaging with the public. Okay, so we engage with them as they come out the pubs. They engage with them as they're then coming out the clubs, and very often it will be the same cops engaging with the same individuals. Oh, you remember me from a few hours ago? Okay, so it's a much more interpersonal relationship. Okay, and because of that, and so much of it is done with humour, and that humour disarms people. Okay, in a good way. All right, it disarms the cop and it disarms the person, so that it's now not a confrontational relationship. From my experience, that's different from what I observe when I go to in the States, and I've been to the States. I love the US, and I have been there about 20 times. Okay, but when I see a lot of the interactions between the police and the public, it tends to be a little bit more military. Okay, and by that I mean, I was at Arlington Cemetery a few years ago, and as it was closing, two MPs, two military police officers came around and told me that the cemetery was closing, and I then asked one of them, when does it open the next time? And it was like speaking to a drill instructor, and he says, Arlington National Cemetery opens at 8 AM in the morning, sir. And that was it. There was no smile, no It was like a robot, okay, a really militaristic response, okay. I get that from soldiers, but I don't think that that's necessarily what should be happening with police officers who are trying to engage their community, okay. All right, now, two incidents which I want to mention, which the cops studied or were brought up, the cops from the US brought up. It showed you there was an incident in London where a mentally disturbed person had an edged weapon, so it was either a long knife or sword, and he was threatening people in the street. So the police arrive, they call for support, and their tactical support group arrive. Okay, so they're the guys that would come out, and they'll have the riot gear, okay, so shields and helmets. And what they did was they surrounded them. As a tactic, we will contain and negotiate. Okay, so that's the police's tactic in the UK. Contain the situation and negotiate with the subject, all right? But there's no negotiation because he was mentally disturbed, so the containment got smaller, and eventually what they did was they managed to pin him down, overwhelm him and arrest him without injury to anybody, okay? Now the difference between that incident and what would likely have happened in the US is that there is a gun in play, and when the cops arrived they would have drawn the gun, okay? And if the guy rushes towards the cops are then going to shoot them, okay? Because that's a legitimate tactic when you're dealing with an edged weapon, okay? And when you don't have the gun, have a gun as a police officer, you don't have a firearm, you're now removing that option, so you have to come up with other things, which means that the attitude needs to be different, and the training and tactics need to be different, okay? So that's one incident, okay? The second incident was another mentally disturbed or deranged person, and it was in one of the cities in the US. The cop arrived on his own, and he then said he either had he was going to shoot somebody or he was going to detonate a bomb. I can't remember exactly, but I remember watching it, and the cop did not shoot him, okay? Despite the guy doing this. So he was reaching behind something and pulling it out, okay? And the cop made a decision that the guy was disturbed, and I was not going to shoot him. He was not going to shoot him. And then they managed to overwhelm him, okay? So I think those incidents are a difference in attitude, okay? And whether it's a societal attitude or an individual attitude, we don't know because we don't have enough data, okay? All right. Now, moving on to my opinions about the US police, okay? I have done ride-alongs twice when I've visited the US. Once was with a dog canine unit in Seattle, and another one was with the gangs unit in San Diego, okay? I cannot fault any of the officers that I came into contact with. I did a full shift in San Diego this year with the gangs unit, and they were utterly professional, okay? They did engage. When I saw them engaging with the public, it was done with humour, okay? It was done with professionalism. All of the cops that were in that unit they have service, and it's a well sought after assignment, okay? So you have to work hard to get there, you have to have good reviews, and when you get in, if you're not cutting it or they don't like you, you're out, okay? So it's a higher graded unit than other police departments or jobs. What the gangs unit also had the value of was that there are 5 cars going out, okay? So they've got 10 cops going into an area at a time. So they're never more than 30 seconds away from one of their team coming to assist them. So that gives them confidence, and in that confidence it means that we can use less force, because the very fact that there's 10 cops arriving or 4 or 6 cops arriving who all know each other really well and have worked together for years is a show of force, which means that the cops can then relax more than if you're there on your own and you're dealing with the same incident, okay? So I cannot fault when I've had personal experience of the police departments that I've that I've engaged with when I've been out there. Okay, so there's 3 incidents I want to talk about. Amadou Diallo was in New York in the 90s, late 90s. Abner Louima, and I apologise if I'm butchering these guys' names, and then George Floyd. Okay, so Amadou Diallo was followed by a plainclothes team in New York, and into an apartment building, and it was dark, and he reached for his wallet and then was shot, and he was shot like 37 times or something like this. Okay, I'm not going to go into the full details of it. Now, what I would ask you there is, would that have happened if he was white? Okay, and I honestly have to say no, that would not have happened if he was white. Okay, so he was reaching for his wallet and the police shot and killed him. Okay, the Abner Louima one is actually much more sinister. Okay, where he was a black, I think he's Haitian, and he was arrested and sexually assaulted and brutalised by the police. Now that's much more indicative of a deep-seated racism, because it's not happened as a result of an incident which has been ongoing. Okay, and then the George Floyd incident, which is the what is erupted to prompt this video. Okay, so when I see lots of these incidents, I look at and I say, would that have happened if that was a white person, if that was a black person, rather than a black person? And I have to say no, it wouldn't have. So that shows a deep rooted something. Okay, now I can fully appreciate that some of these cops might not be racist. Okay, but they're dealing with the black community, reeks of racism. Okay, and those are 2 things that as a white population we have to really work hard on. Okay, so the average net worth of a black adult in the US, so an adult who is black in the US, is $6,000. I heard this statistic on the radio the other day, $6,000. The average net worth of an adult in the US who is white is $240,000, or there or thereabouts. It's over $200,000. So that's a problem with the system. Okay, and that then infiltrates down to your police officers who are members of your society as well. Okay, I fully support the notion that most police officers are trying to go out there and do their job well. Okay, I actually think that's the case. I think it's a much more deep-seated problem than that we just have racist cops. I think some of them are, without a doubt. Some of them, and many of them, will act on that racism, but that's only part of the problem. The bigger part of the problem is that our whole societies are racist against people of colour. Okay, all right. Now there was also another incident where I saw last year. A black family had been shopping at Walmart or something like that, and the little girl, who was about 6 or 7 years old, had picked up a doll and had left without paying, and the staff phoned the police. Okay, and when the police arrived, they engaged the family who were in the car park, or the parking lot, at gunpoint. So that would never have happened if that family were white. Okay, and I think if the family were white, the police would never have been called in the first place. Excuse me, because the family would have been engaged by the staff. Okay, so that's my opinion of what happened with that incident, and that is about a societal racism towards people of colour. Okay, and we only have to look at incidents of, we saw it in Michigan at the Michigan Capitol a few weeks ago, with these armed white men protesting the COVID-19 lockdown, who were armed with AR-19s and not being engaged by the police. Now, can you imagine if that had happened if they were all black? Okay, so if you look at where the assault weapons ban came from by Ronald Reagan, that was towards the end of the 1970s, when black militants started arming themselves, okay, and I know I'm going to get some of this language wrong, and I do not mean to, okay. I'm apologising for it as it's happening, okay. So as a result of that, they then brought an assault weapons ban in, and then that we know that lapsed whenever that was, 10 years or so ago, okay. All right, so that's an overview of what I think is going on with the US police and the US society, okay. Now, one of the questions that we'll ask is, why don't cops speak out? Why don't good police officers speak out against poorer police officers or racist police officers? So one thing is that they do. Some departments will immediately fire or investigate those officers, so that happens sometimes. The other thing that happens, which is one of the reasons why they don't, is it because these men and women are relying on the other men and women within the department to support them when it is going wrong. And in the US, because your society or the society is different, when it goes wrong, it becomes life-threatening. So here, when it goes wrong, it is rarely life-threatening because our society is significantly less violent and we have less guns than the US do. But when it goes wrong in the US, it is life-threatening. Okay, you've also got your the 3 strikes rule for felonies. Okay, so if somebody is sitting, if a black person or any person is sitting with 2 felony convictions, and they have already been and they have committed a felony, and the police arrive, they're going to jail for the rest of their life. Okay, so there's no reason for them not to want to try and violently escape. Okay, if that is what is required. And because of that, 3 strikes and you're out, it makes the stakes so much higher for both the perpetrator and the police. Okay, so again, that's another societal issue. All right, which disproportionately works against people of colour. Okay, so there's lots of stuff going on there. So cops don't speak out because they are frightened. They're frightened of repercussions against them from their fellow officers, and they're also frightened of not being backed up when they need to, when they're out on the street. Okay, right, now lastly, when I look at the incidents of, so I look at the George Floyd incident, and my opinion is that that man was lynched. Okay, that man was murdered by a white person, a white man, in a position of power, when he was black and not in a position of power. He was handcuffed and subdued. What should have happened is that as soon as he's handcuffed, there was 4 cops there. They're able to pick him up, hold him against the car, or keep him on the ground without being on top of him. Okay, and if they had done that, he would be alive today. Okay, now even if he's still violently struggling at that point, okay, if he's on the ground and handcuffed, okay, and I'm not laughing here at all, okay, not at all, but if he's on the ground and handcuffed, that's a much easier person to control than somebody that is standing up and handcuffed and somebody who's standing up and not handcuffed. Okay, so there was no requirement for the police officer to be kneeling on his neck. Okay, there was other police officers around. They were doing some crowd control, and one of them could have helped. Okay, so that's my opinion of what happened to George Floyd. Okay, it was a hugely excessive use of force. It was massively disproportionate, and they murdered him. Okay, it was a lynching, and we watched it on social media and on the news. Okay, when you look at the Phillip Costello incident, watch it and look at the cop's reaction after he has shot Mr. Costello. Okay. And I think he fully understands the gravity of what has happened, and you look at his reaction. So he's either temperamentally not sound, okay, as a person, to not be able to deal with that. He has never thought about having to deal with that, or he has been under such stress from other places that it has caused him to act poorly, and then that is what his reaction is. And none of these are excuses for what he did, okay? I'm not excusing it. All I'm doing is trying to offer an opinion or an explanation of it. So I have met cops here who have been involved in firearms incidents where they have shot somebody and they were neither up nor down about it afterwards, okay? Or if they had, it wasn't these long-lasting repercussions of I shot somebody or I shot and killed somebody, okay? They fully accept it as part of their job. They have done lots of mental preparation for it, and they're able to justify it and rationalise it to themselves, okay? So the incident where I was carjacked at gunpoint, I'd already prepared for that for a long time before it happened. I would think, what would I do if that happened, okay? And because I'd already prepared myself mentally for it, it wasn't news to me, okay? So better preparation for the police officers, and if he has had a traumatic event beforehand, better support services for police officers so that these incidents don't accrue and then we get a horrendous incident like what happened to Phillip Costello, okay? So if we look after our police officers better, if we look after our society better, these incidents won't happen, okay? It's just like looking after your body better. If you look after your body better, you're less likely to get ill, okay? If you eat well, exercise, sleep properly, you are less likely to put the conditions in place where problems happen within your body. So if we look at our police officers and our police departments and our society as the body, and look for the environment which nourishes health and supports and reinforces healthy behaviours, these incidents are going to be far less likely to happen in the first place. And I think that's the difference between, one of the major differences between the US and the UK, which I have previously spoken about, okay? So we've got that. We've also got looking at if the police departments in the US spend less money on militarising their departments with these big heavy armoured cars and lots of SWAT equipment, and spend more of that money engaging with the community. And I'll give you a couple of incidents why engaging with your community is so important. It is a little bit like David in the Lion's Den, okay, as a parable, okay. And again, I'm apologising if I'm missing the mark with some of these analogies, okay. So we had a guy that worked here. He was a local intelligence officer. He had worked here for a long time and he knew everybody, okay. And if there was a murder or a homicide in that area, this fella's phone would ring off the hook from the community phoning and providing information, and very often the perpetrator was arrested very quickly as a result of that. So he had the trust of the community, okay, and the community trusted him, all right, not to abuse that, all right. So that comes from engaging in your community, okay. There's two other incidents which happened in the US. There was a cop in the 80s, and again, I know these are a long time ago. He had joined the police in London and then moved to the US and joined the LAPD. Two officers were involved in an incident, and one of the officers' guns were stolen, and this Englishman in LA, had gone out and engaged with his community, because he worked as a community police officer in Los Angeles, and within a couple of days the police officer's gun was returned, okay. So that comes from building relationships with the community that you work in, okay. And then, I'm probably going to get the details of this incident wrong. The incident in the mosque in New York when Bill Bratton was a commissioner, there was an incident, and I think a cop's gun was stolen and taken into the mosque, and it was through community relations that that gun was recovered, okay. I also get a more conservative or right-wing viewpoint that should just be shown. They should just be shown force in order to, because this is a society of laws, and people butchered those laws and or took advantage or disregarded those laws and stole that cop's gun. And what I would ask there is we look at a bigger picture. Okay, are we causing more problems by being more heavy-handed with your community and policing through fear than policing through cooperation? And absolutely yes, we are causing more problems with that. Okay, all right. So that's just thoughts on. There's a bunch of stuff there, and there's a whole bunch of context there. But yes, I do think that the police in the US use, from what I see, they use disproportionate force towards when they're dealing with people of colour than they do towards white people. Okay, I see it over and over and over again, and every time I see these incidents, either online or on the television, the question I ask myself is, if that was a white person, would that have happened? And I have to say, no, it wouldn't have. Now, and lastly, and this is lastly, that's not to say that there are not good cops out there. There are loads of good cops out there that are doing a really good job in trying to serve their community and who are motivated by altruism. Okay, I was one of them. I knew a whole bunch of them that actually wanted to go out there and do a good job for their community. It was through a sense of community service or a vocation or a devotion towards their community. I worked with a lot of them, and I have got no reason to disbelieve that people in the US, and that's including police, are different from that. The problem we have is the bad apples, and I'm not saying that a few bad apples, I'm not using that. It poisons everything, okay, because the police are in a position of power, all right, and that abuse of power is catastrophic for communities. Okay, so I hope this has been helpful in some way. I know that I've gone on, we're 37 minutes. Okay, so I know that I've gone on some ways in this, and if you've got to the end of it, then thank you for watching it. And if it's helpful or it's contributing to the conversation, please share it or take out some of what I've said. And I thank you for watching, and love and peace to you all, and we need to change something.